Very good afternoon to everyone. So these are the topics which we'll be covering through this webinar. First is the overview of the payment card industry. Second, what is PCI SSF or particularly SSS or SLC. Then applicability of the PCI SLC, that is to whom or which all kind of entities the SLC standard is applicable. Okay, we'll be talking about the control objective as in what all requirements are there within the standard. Next, what are the benefits of implementing or having the certification? Sixth will be the secure SLC assessment process and the listing process over the council's website. And the last will be maintaining secure SLC qualified vendor status. Okay. First, let's talk about what is payment card industry, okay, or PCSSC as in Payment Card Industry Security Standard Council. Okay, it's basically a global forum which is involved in the development of various PCI standards and resources to institutions to understand and implement security standards, okay, to make sure their systems or their infrastructure or the processes is protected against any breaches or from the theft of cardholder data. Next, what they do is they probably or they also help vendors or the customers to understand and implement security standards for creating secure payment solutions or secure payment ecosystems. At the same time, they provide technical and operational requirements for protecting cardholder data. Now, PCISSC, they have given multiple state standards or multiple frameworks covering the entire PCI ecosystem. Okay, so whatever technology, whatever solution you name it, there is a standard given by PCISSC. Okay, segregated by, say, for example, standard is there for manufacturers, specific standard is there for the vendors or the merchants and the processors. Okay, first is maybe the PCI PTS, which talks about physical and logical security of the point of sale devices or terminals. Okay. PTS devices are basically the used by the merchants at the point of interaction for capturing payment card data, okay, from their customers. Then PCI SSF, which we'll be talking through the session today. Then PCI DSS, which talks about the certificating cardholder data. Other standards are maybe P2P. Okay, P2P is basically a solution. Okay, which cryptographically protects account data from the point where merchant captures the card from their customers, okay, till the time the data is sent to the acquirer. So entire transmission, how the channel is secured, that's covered basically under P2P standards. Okay, now coming to what is SSF. Okay, the basic intent of this session, we'll be discussing about SSF. Okay, so PCI SSF, Software Security Framework, is a collection of two standards and program for the secure design and development of the payment softwares. So it basically revolves around secure development and secure design of the payment softwares or the payment products. Okay, because security is a very crucial part in the payment softwares. Okay, hence it's very necessary to have a reliable and accurate payment transactions. This SSF standard, basically, if you guys remember, previously there used to be a PADS standard, Payment Application Data Security Standard. There was standard till last year, and this standard was covering about the application development and for the vendors till last year. So what PCSSC they have done, they have replaced the PADS standard from this SSF. Okay, now SSF is basically further segregated into that is PCI Secure SLC. The very first standard, that is SSS, Secure Software Standard, It outlines the security requirements and the assessment procedures to help the payment application developers, okay, or the vendors who are developing the payment applications on how to adequately protect the integrity and the confidentiality of the payment transaction data which is getting processed or transmitted through their payment softwares. Okay, this standard is basically applicable, or the SSS is basically applicable for the vendors who develop the payment softwares and sell it or distribute it or license it to a third parties. Okay, as in, say for example, organization A, they have developed a middleware, payment middleware or the payment gateway application. Now, how this SSS will be applicable to them in the case when they're either selling this payment gateway application, okay, or distributing it or licensing it to the third parties. In that case, SSS applicable. Now, talking about the software lifecycle standard, okay, this lifecycle standard is basically set of requirements and assessment procedures which provides a baseline of security requirements which can help the software vendors to first securely design, securely develop, and securely maintain the software throughout the life cycle process. Okay, you guys might be knowing there are basically 7 phases of the application development. First is the requirement collection or the planning phase. Second, defining the feasibility of the product. Then third is designing. Fourth is building or coding phase basically. Fifth is testing the code, okay, which has developed. Sixth is deployment, and the last is the maintenance phase. So this basically standard talks about implementing security throughout the life cycle of the application. Okay, the basic intent of this software is to help the vendors to protect the sensitive data or minimize the vulnerabilities or particularly defend the softwares from any attacks throughout the entire software lifecycle process. Next is, what are SSF assessor companies? Okay, so SSF assessor companies are the entities or the organizations which are qualified by PCI SSC, or the entities which are designated by PCI SSC to perform assessments against the SSC standard, that is Secure Software Standard, or SLC standard. That is, these entities are the basically auditing entities or the auditors who are qualified by the PCI-SSC to perform assessment against these two standards. These are basically called as SSF assessor companies. Now the list of these assessor companies are available over the PCI Council's website. You can you can browse the website. Okay, over the assessor listing, you can see who all are the assessor companies, SN for who are certified to do the assessment for SSS or SLC. Now let's talk about the applicability of SLC standard. We have so far discussed about the applicability of SSS. SSS is basically applicable to the entities who are either selling, distributing, or licensing the applications to any of the third parties. In that case, SSS is applicable. Okay. Now this SLC is specifically for the vendor softwares. It's not necessarily that they outsource this application. Okay, this standard is specifically for the vendors to demonstrate that the process which they are following for the development of the application or throughout the 7 phases of the application, that process itself is certified. Okay, so the applicability is for the intended eligible software vendors that develop software for the payment industry. Okay, the basic definition of eligible software, it can include any software or software component which is present in the payment environment, which is eitherly involved in storing, processing or transmitting of any cardholder data. Okay, any software or any software component which is basically involved in storing, processing, or transmitting of cardholder data, that application is basically applicable for, or that process for development of that application is eligible for SLC. Also, if the application does not handle any payment data, but it may share resources which are defined within the payment environment. Say, for example, fraud management system. It might not have any cardholder data, but still it provides resources within the payment ecosystem or the payment environment. Hence, such applications or the processes for the applications also that falls under the purview of SLC standard. Okay. Now the software vendors who have their life cycle management processes or the practices which they are following to develop the application, they will be recognized on the PCI SSC list, and they will be they will be called as, or they will be termed as secure SLC qualified vendors. Qualified vendors as in these are the vendors who have which are defined in the SLC standard. Now let's discuss what all categories are there in the product for which SLC is basically applicable. Okay, so these are the some categories which we have mentioned here. Okay, to which the PCI SLC standard is applicable. Automated fuel dispenser. Okay, for example, it's a payment software which provides operation and management of point of sale terminals in the fuel dispensing environment. Okay, then card not present, basically it's used by the merchants to facilitate the transaction. Okay, so the transaction transmission and processing of payment is done through such of the applications, that is card not present. Then payment back office. Okay, back office applications which can be used for fraud reporting or marketing, all, or hotel property management. Such applications are called as payment back office. So PCI SLC is applicable for such applications also, or such softwares also. Then payment component. Okay, then payment gateway or switch, which helps the merchants to capture the transaction, or the payment gateway basically captures the data from the customers on behalf of merchant and transmit the data to the banks or the acquirers for authorization. Then payment middleware. Okay, payment middleware is basically a software which facilitates the transmission and processing of payment authorization and does settlement from merchant POS environment to the processor. Then there are multiple types of POS applications or softwares like POS admin, POS face-to-face POI, POS kiosk, POS specialized, POS suite or general. Okay, and the shopping cart or storefront. That's basically for the e-commerce kind of merchants. Now coming to the security objectives. Okay, that what all requirements or what all controls are there in the SLC standard. Okay, so basically there are 10 control objectives in the SLC standards which are classified into four major sections. Okay, so the four major sections is, first one is software security governance. This section majorly talks about the governance process while the development of the application or the software. Okay, so vendors should have a formal security governance program, okay, to demonstrate the commitment towards building a secure software and protecting the sensitive transaction or sensitive data with respect to payment is securely stored, processed, or transmitted by that software. Okay, so this is basically talking about the governance or structure, or how the governance should be implemented while the development or of the application is being done. Okay, then second is secure software engineering. Software should be designed and developed to protect all the critical software assets which it is handling, and at the same time it should be developed in such a manner that it is resistant to protect the system from all kind of threats or attacks. So how that is being done is covered in the second section, that is secure software engineering. Third one is secure software and data management. Okay, this section talks about the confidentiality, or basically how the confidentiality and integrity of software should be maintained, okay, throughout the entire life cycle process. And the last one is security communications. This section talks about how communications should be done by the vendors to its various stakeholders. Stakeholders as in to whom they will be giving this application, maybe customers or installers or integrators. Okay. So this section talks about how the vendors, or in what all scenarios the vendors should communicate to such stakeholders. Maybe say for example, in case of any issues in the software, how they should connect or how they should communicate. Those details are covered in this particular section. Okay, so these are the 4 basic sections in which the 10 control objectives of the standard are classified. So these are the 10 control objectives which we can see: security, responsibility, resources, software security policy and strategy, threat identification and mitigation, vulnerability detection and mitigation, change management. Then sixth is software integrity protection, sensitive data protection, software vendor implementation guide, stakeholder communications, and software update information. So these are the 10 control objectives which are there in the standard, talking about the secure development or secure life cycle procedure of the application, or as in how to incorporate security within the software life cycle phases. Okay, we'll go quickly one by one with the each security or each control objectives. Okay, so first one is basically security responsibilities and the resources. Okay, as per this control objectives, the vendors basically the entities which are developing the software applications. So we'll be treating, or we'll be calling those entities as a vendor here. So the objective of this control objective is basically that vendor senior leadership or the management of that vendor organization should assign overall responsibility of the security of that standard or the software to a team or to an individual, or maybe in other terms what we can call it as senior leadership team shall make somebody in organization as accountable for ensuring security of the software products and the services which they are developing. Okay, now the responsibilities include keeping senior leadership team informed about the security updates or what all bugs are there in the softwares, okay, or any other matter which is related to the security of software products and services. So the leadership team of vendor, they should designate somebody or a team for the security of the vendor services or the software which they are developing. Okay, now after the responsibilities are assigned, what this control objective is saying, that relevant personnel, okay, to whom this responsibility have been assigned, okay, they are knowledgeable enough to perform such activities. Okay, in order to meet the security responsibilities which they have been designated, the development personnel or the software development personnel, they should be trained and have experience in performing the responsibilities which they have been assigned. Okay, now let's talk about second control objectives, that is software security policy and strategy. Okay, now many organizations, they are subject to the requirement of protection of certain type of information, be it PII, be it cardholder data, or be it protected health information. Okay, so what these vendors are supposed to, they are required to identify and monitor external regulatory, okay, or industry security and compliance requirement. Okay, so that these vendors are aware about the external security and compliance obligations. Okay, so what these third parties, as in the external regulatories and the industry security and compliance requirements, what they do, they basically time to time they evolve and they publish new guidelines that these are the latest modifications in the standard. So if the vendor is identifying, if vendor is monitoring such guidelines, what they will come to know that these, oh, today these are the latest security and compliance obligations which they must follow. Okay. So they should implement a process to identify and monitor such external regulatory. Okay. As part of this control objectives, the vendors are supposed to define software security policy. Okay. The software security policy should specify the rules and goals to ensure that their products and services are designed, developed, and maintained to resist any kind of attack. Okay, so the security policy defines the rules and goals to ensure that their products are securely developed, designed, maintained to protect from any of the attacks. Okay, now after the security policy, they should have also a security strategy to ensure that security of software vendors and products, and it should satisfy the software security policy. Okay, now the control objective 3, threat identification and mitigation. Okay, the vendors or the software vendors, they are required to implement a process for identifying and classifying critical assets in the software and maintain inventory of such assets. Okay, so vendors, first they should identify what all critical assets which a software is holding, and then again classify them on the basis of their criticality. Okay, critical assets, it can include maybe sensitive data, okay, which that vendor or the software vendor is collecting, storing, or processing or transmitting. Okay, next is vulnerability detection and mitigation. Okay, now this particular control objective says that the softwares or the applications or the product, these should be monitored and routinely tested to confirm that the vulnerabilities which are identified during the testing are mitigated well before the application of the code updates are released into the production. Okay, and the security testing, it should not be like that security testing is done only when the application is supposed to be released into the production. What this control objective is saying instead, the testing is supposed to be done during all the pre-release phases of the software. Okay, it should not be only while before the release. It should, the security testing should be done during all the pre-release phases of the software. Okay, and so as per this control objective, the organization or the vendors are supposed to develop a software testing and vulnerability management policy. Okay, which should define how the software vendors or what all tools or methods they will be using to perform the testing, or they will be using to identify the vulnerabilities. Okay, then second, that software testing policy should include what is the procedure which they will be following to remediate or treat the vulnerabilities which will be found in the application testing, and controls which will be implemented to make sure the vulnerabilities are not repeated again during the second testing. Okay, so this is particularly control objective number 4. Okay, and also this requirement talks about, say for example, it usually happens, many of our customers say that in some cases it's not possible to remediate some vulnerabilities, maybe the product is to a end of life cycle. Okay, so what standard this says that this control objective says is, in case there are, the application or the vendor is not supposed to or not able to remediate those vulnerabilities, in that scenario business justification should be made. Business justification is in the document, should be prepared for not fixing the vulnerabilities prior to the release, and that justification document should be approved by management with additional guidance on how to mitigate that risk until the security update or the fix can be made available. Okay, as in, say for example, vulnerabilities, a vendor is not able to fix a vulnerability. What they're supposed to do: first, prepare a business justification document mentioning the reason why they are not able to fix this vulnerability, approved by management. And second, the guidance or the procedure should be defined that till the time we are able to fix these vulnerabilities, what all things we should do to mitigate or to reduce the risk of that particular vulnerability. This is control objective 4. Now, control objective 5 talks about the change management procedures. Okay, so far we have only seen, so far it's basically what all steps an vendor should follow throughout the development phase of application. Okay, control objective 5, it says that all the changes which are done in the application, all such changes should be tracked and monitored. Okay, or maybe in case of any changes which are happening in the application, there should be a proper change record or change ticket. Okay, the change ticket or the change management procedure, what it should follow is: first, what is the reason for particular change or justification for change. Okay, if we are updating the product version or if we are making the changes such that the version is changing, for example from 1.0 to 1.1, okay, so there should be a proper change record for that. Now that change record, what all things it should include: first, reason or the justification of the change or why this change is happening. Second, what is the impact this change is going to make on the application. Then the changes should be authorized or approved by the management or at least the senior person from the vendor's team. Then functionality testing reports or functionality testing details to make sure that it is not going to impact or that this change is not going to adversely impact the application. Okay, and the backout procedures. So each change record should have 5 things. First, reason or justification of change. Second, change impact. Third, the approval details. Fourth, functionality testing details. And fifth is the backout procedures. Okay. Also, this control objective says that vendors should maintain an inventory. That first, whatever they are doing, they should maintain a change record for that. Very first thing. Second, all the changes should be tracked in an inventory, as in they are saying that prepare an inventory where a person can see all the changes which has been made throughout the application development phase. Okay, so inventory should have all the changes listed down. Okay, name of the individual or the creator of that particular code, person who is authorizing the change, and the reason for the change. Okay, so the inventory should be maintained, which should log all the changes which are happening in the application. Also, majorly this control objective talks about the vendors should develop a versioning methodology document. Okay, as in what is the procedure or process the vendor will follow to version the software. As in today they are having 1.0.0.0. Then what is the meaning of 1? What is the meaning of 0.0.0? In which all scenarios, which category or which integer will be changed. Okay, in which scenario 1.0.0.02 will be changed from 1.1 0.0. So all those criteria should be mentioned in the versioning methodology document. Okay, this process should uniquely identify each version of the application. Okay, this is control objective 5. Control objective 6, that is software integrity protection. That is maintain the integrity of software throughout the life cycle. So basically what happens is effective secure code control practice helps the vendor to ensure that all the changes which are authorized are performed by the only person who are having legitimate access to the code. Okay. Examples of these practice can include code check-in or code checkout procedures with access control. Or for example, comparing the checksum value, as in using the checksum before updating the code to confirm that the last approved version has not been changed. That is, when a person is going to update the changes or making the changes in the code, what that person should do, he should immediately check the checksum value of the code which is having, which is supposed to update, and the last approved version of the code to make sure that the checksum value remains same. So this will help him to identify that there is no unauthorized change which has been made. So this is how the integrity of the software will be maintained. Okay. And also as part of this control objective, vendor should develop a process for communication, secure delivery, and secure installation of patches and updates to its stakeholders. As in, now in case of any updates, okay, in case of any updates or the release, vendor is supposed to inform the stakeholders that, hey, these are the latest updates in our software. Okay. So what is the procedure which is supposed to be followed by the vendor? They should document it, as in how they will be communicating to the vendors, sorry, stakeholders. Okay. What will be the channel to deliver the patches or updates of the application, or what will be the procedure to install that respective patch or updates. So organization or the vendors, they should have a process document to define all such things. Control objective 7, sensitive data protection. Okay. Vendors, they should protect the confidentiality of any sensitive protection data. Okay. Sensitive protection data is in the data which is owned by an entity other than the software vendor. Now say for example, uh, let's say company A. Okay, company A has developed an application and QRC has taken the services of that application. Okay, so whatever production data which QRC is having, that will be called as sensitive production data for company A. Okay, so company A, whatever sensitive production data company A is getting from its software on behalf of QRC, they should implement a control to protect such sensitive data. Okay. In case, or maybe the scenarios are, say, for example, company A needs to do some troubleshooting, or say, for example, QRC is saying there is some issue in the application. Okay. So, what company A will say, provide us your sample data, we will do the troubleshooting to make sure it's resolved. So, in that case scenario, QRC will be providing some data to company A to do the troubleshooting. So whatever data QRC is providing to company A, that will be treated as sensitive production data. Production data. In that scenario, whatever data company A is collecting from QRC, they should prepare a proper document for that. As in, they should maintain what is the data which they are collecting from QRC, what is the retention period of that data which they are collecting from QRC. Okay, like say for example, they are collecting transaction data. So the vendor is supposed to, or company A is supposed to confirm that the data which they are getting from QRC, they will be doing troubleshooting only with respect to that data. And after that troubleshooting is done, they will securely delete that data. Okay. So this control objective talks about that. Okay. Also, whatever data this vendor is capturing, they should prepare some sort of inventory. Inventory as in what type of data which they are capturing, the vendor is capturing from their customers. Okay. What will be the retention period? Say, for example, company A is getting some data to do the troubleshooting. Okay. So what data they are storing? or what data they are basically capturing. First, what will be the retention period of that data? That is, till the troubleshooting is done, they will be retaining the data. Okay. Where the data is storing or where the data will be stored. Second, whether storage of data is permitted or not. Then what is the control which they have implemented to make sure the data is securely stored? Okay. What is the justification for that data? So all such details about the data which company A is taking from QRC to do the troubleshooting should be documented in an inventory. So this is control objective 7, sensitive data protection. Now 8, software vendor implementation guide. As per this control objectives, and similar requirement was there in the PADSs also. It's common. The vendors should prepare an implementation guide. Okay, that is, they should develop a secure software implementation guide which should include guidance. First, guidance on proper configuration of the security related options or parameters in the vendor softwares. Okay, configuration related security options may be, say for example, configurable parameters can be, say for example, password length. Okay, minimum length should be 7 or minimum length should be 8. Okay, so what vendors are supposed to do, they should provide a proper guidance on how to configure such configurable controls or the parameters in the applications or the software. First. Second, detailed instruction on how to securely install, initialize, configure, and maintain all software components and supported platforms. As in, the vendor should document it that this software or how this software is supposed to be securely installed or configured. And last, in case of any changes in the application, this implementation guide will be updated. So these are the 3 things which should a vendor include in the implementation guide. Ninth is the stakeholder communications, as in whenever there are any changes in the application or whenever there are any vulnerabilities which are identified in the software, stake the vendors should communicate immediately to the stakeholders that these are the latest vulnerabilities available in the softwares, and these are the ways how these vulnerabilities should be fixed. Okay, the mode of communication by vendor to the stakeholders can be either email notification, website alerts, written notices, or social media platform. The channel of communication can be defined by the vendor, but definitely in case of any changes or any vulnerabilities which are identified in the software, it should be immediately informed to the stakeholders. Last control objectives, okay, that is basically vendor should implement a process to document all the changes which are happening in the software and communicate it to the various stakeholders. As in, whatever changes they are doing in the software, they should document it and they should communicate with the stakeholders. So these are the 10 control objectives which we have discussed so far about, or which are there in the PCI SLC standard. Now let's discuss what are the benefits of PCI SLC standard. Okay. First, after the vendor is certified, okay, or after the vendor is showing the compliance requirement, or it's demonstrating its procedure is in accordance with the standard requirement of SLC, PCI SSC, what they will do, they will list down this vendor name, say for example, company A, over the website, over their website, so that any prospect customer for company A can go to the website of PCI SSC and see that yeah, this vendor is qualified or the procedures which they are following to develop their softwares is qualified. Okay, so this is basically increasing the visibility of vendors. Okay, now second, after the certification is done, basically in case of some changes in the application, vendors are supposed to do delta assessments. as in the PCI also, in case of any changes in the certified processes, the organizations are supposed to do delta assessment. Okay. And similarly in SLC also, in case of any changes in the certified processes, the vendors are supposed to do delta assessment. So after the vendors are qualified, they can do delta assessment on their own. That is, without the involvement of assessors, they can do the delta assessment. Okay, so this is one of the benefit. Second, after the vendor is qualified as an SLC qualified vendor, they can also seek the eligibility of softwares under PCI SSS program. Okay, so if a vendor is qualified as an SLC qualified vendor, that vendor can have eligibility for secure software products under the SSS program. Okay. Also, this standard compliance to this standard demonstrates that vendor has followed security in each step of the software development lifecycle procedures. We discussed about the 7 phases of the application development. Okay. So basically, certification to this standard demonstrate that vendor has implemented security or it has followed security throughout the each step of the development. Okay. Now, after successful listing, the vendors are supposed to do annual attestation. Okay. So this annual attestation, these vendors can do on their own. They don't need to go to any third party or the QSAs to perform or the SSS to do the annual attestation. They can do it on their own and submit the updated AOC to the council. Okay. Next is the standard SLC is geared towards more of the vendor certification instead of the product and software. So this is basically after the certification is done, the vendor will be called as SLC qualified vendor. It's not about the product level certification. This demonstrates that the vendor is qualified to develop the software. This is one of the very important benefit of the standard. It is again more agility to perform development techniques and release cycles, increased flexibility and accountability for the software vendors to achieve the PCI requirements. Okay. Again, this standard is expected to be updated in a more frequent manner as per the compliance requirements or the external requirements are updated on day-to-day basis. The standard will be updated on much frequent manner. Okay. Allowed for improved flexibility to accommodate various software management approaches. Okay. Every organization, they might have a separate software management approach. Okay. So what this standard allows, flexibility to accommodate all kind of software management when organizations are having. Okay. Finally, streamlined assessment process and simplified listing management. The process to get certified is very easy. It's not that critical. So this is again one of the benefit. Now let's try to see what is the assessment process or how basically the assessment will be done in case of PCSLC and how listing will be done. Okay. First, if a vendor decides to go for SLC certification, first they are supposed to select an assessor company, maybe QRC. Okay. They can go over the website of the PCSSC, they can search for the assessor company like QRC and they can assign someone or designate QRC as a vendor, as in the assessor company to perform the assessment. Second, the vendor and the assessor company, they will come together and they will define the scope of assessment, as in what all services or what all processes they will be considering in the scope of assessment of this SLC certification. Third, SLC assessor company, they will perform the gap assessment. Gap assessment as in they will be validating what are the existing SLC methods, policy and procedures, okay, which are there in the organization, and they will map it against the requirements or the standard of controls of the SLC. Okay, so whatever the gaps will be there, okay, say for example, they are doing this, ABC, and what is supposed to be done is XYZ. So whatever the gap will be there, the assessor company will list down those gaps. They will submit the gap report to the vendor. Now, vendor referring to the gaps, they are supposed to remediate those gaps or implement the missing controls. Okay. Next step, after the closure of the gaps has been done by the vendors. Okay. Now, vendor is supposed to inform that, say, for example, hi QRC, whatever gaps you have given to us, we have closed those gaps. Okay. So what QRC as an assessor they will do, they will go back again. We will validate the current procedures to make sure, yeah, it's now in the, it's mapping the requirement or the control objectives which we have discussed. Okay. We need to make sure that all the controls are closed. Okay. Oh, sorry, all the gaps are closed and all controls are implemented as per the standard requirement. Okay. So once the assessor company is satisfied with the whatever applicable requirements or whatever controls which a SLC vendor has implemented, okay, the assessor company is supposed to prepare two documents, that is report on compliance along with a attestation of compliance. So the assessor after the certification, after the assessment is done, as in assessor company will take all the evidences from the vendor to make sure that controls are implemented. After that is done, the assessor company will prepare two documents, ROC, AOC, and will submit it to the PCI SSC for review. After the QSA or after the assessor has submitted the ROC, AOC to the council, what they will do, they will basically issue an invoice to a vendor to review the submission. Okay. Now the payment or whatever the amount in the invoice, it may change from vendor to vendor or what kind of services they are requiring to certify. Okay, it can change, but PCSSC after receiving the AOC and ROC, they will raise an invoice to the vendor. Okay, so once PCSSC receives the full amount of the invoice from the vendor, PCSSC will review the AOC and ROC which was submitted by the assessor company. Okay, once the PCSSC reviews it, they will they will do some sort of validations that it is fine or whether it is adequate as per the standard requirement or not. Okay, once they are done, they will accept the submission. Okay, and what they will do after the acceptance of the submission, first they will list down this vendor as a secure SLC qualified vendor on their PCI website. Okay. First, what they will do, they will list down this vendor as a qualified vendor in their website, and they will countersign the AOC which the assessor has submitted to them and send back a copy to vendor and SLC assessor. Okay. Now, once the listing is done, or once we call it as the vendor is qualified as a SLC vendor, the listing will be applicable for 3 years. That is, validation of this certification is for 3 years. Okay. Now, in case if council suspects any vulnerabilities or security issues in the procedure of that SLC vendor, they have the rights to revoke the acceptance. Okay. And the listed vendors can go over to the section of secure SLC qualified software vendors and see their listing on the PCI website. So this is the process how assessment is done with respect to PCI SLC and how listing is done over the council's website. After the assessment is completed, okay, every year the vendor is supposed to submit an AOC, self-signed AOC to the council. Okay, they are supposed to perform some annual attestation steps. Annual attestation steps as in they need to go through their processes and procedures annually. They need to confirm that yeah, the process which we certified is still the same. There has been no changes in the procedures. Along with that document, they need to submit the updated AOC or any other applicable documentations to the PCI SSC, or that is the SLC program manager. if you see, we have mentioned any applicable documentation, as in, say for example, we talked about delta assessment. Say for example, today company or there are changes in the certified processes of the SLC vendor. Okay. Now they are supposed to identify these changes in a document called as change impact document. Okay, they need to list down all the changes which they have done, and then accordingly update that AOC and give it those documents to the PCI-SLC. Again, PCI-SLC will do the same. They will review the changes which has been done in the systems or the processes, and they will review the AOC and they will give it back to the vendor, stating that yeah, this is fine. Now, in case of non-submission of AOC to the PCI-SLC for attestation of compliance, okay, as in if a vendor has not submitted the AOC to the PCI SSC for annual attestation, PCI SSC has right to administratively expire the vendor listing from the council's website. As in, if a vendor, say for example company A, has failed to send the updated AOC after the annual period, PCISSC has right to administratively early expire that listing. So this is very requirement, very initial crucial point, that all the vendors after the certification is done, they should submit the AOC to the PCI council. Otherwise, the council might or they may early administratively expire the listing of the vendor. Now, vendor reassessment. Okay. So the annual attestation is supposed to be done annually, which can be done by the vendor. Okay. Now, reassessment as in the validity, since we have discussed validity is for 3 years. After 3 years, the vendors are supposed to initiate the reassessment. Okay. Now, there are two following options. Out of these two, the vendor reassessment can be done. First, either vendor can go for new full attestation or new full assessment or expiry. In case of new full assessment, the same procedure will be followed which we have discussed. As in, again, vendor is supposed to go back to QSA, okay, confirm the scope of assessment, do the gap assessment, SSR will prepare the report, will submit it to the council. So the same procedure will be followed in case of new full assessment. Okay. In case of expiry, if the, say for example, if SLC qualified vendor has not submitted any AOC to the council, okay, what council will do? They will remove the listing from their website, or they will be no longer called as qualified SLC vendor. Okay, so the reassessment has either two options: full assessment or expiry. Now, in case of any changes to the submission process, okay, now say for example, if there are any changes to the qualified processes of the organization, the vendor, what they're supposed to do, they should prepare and share AOC along with vendor VRA, change impact template to the PCI SSC manager, the process which we discussed previously. See, uh, yeah, annual attestation. Okay, here, annually secure SLC qualified vendor must submit an updated AOC to PCI SSC. So, in case of this annual attestation, if the vendor feels that there are some changes in the process, or if the SLC vendor says that we want to make changes in the listings of how the SSC has listed, what they're supposed to do, they should prepare a AOC, updated AOC, okay, VRA, vendor release agreement, and change impact template, as in mentioning what all changes have been done in that document, and send it to the program manager. Again, same process will be followed. PCI SSC will issue an invoice to vendor. Vendor needs to make the payment. Okay, after the payment is done, PCI SSC will review and will communicate to the vendor that we have accepted these changes, and after the changes has been done, the updates will be reflected over the website of the council. Okay, and the corresponding AOC will be signed back and shared back to the vendor. Now, in case of what changes, what all documentations are supposed to be prepared and updated? Okay, this slide talks about in case of any administrative changes, as in administrative changes, any name of organization is changed. Okay, company A has changed from company A to company C. That is called as administrative change. Designated change as in they have made changes into the certified processes. Okay, say for example, they have changed the process to okay, say for example, initially they designed that all the patches or all the updates in the application will be sent via SFTP to the customers or stakeholders. Now they have changed the update mechanism. That will be treated as designated change. And annual attestation is the annually what they are supposed to prepare the updated AOC, ROC and share with the council. So these are the documentations which vendor is supposed to prepare and share with council. In case of administrative change, what they're supposed to do, prepare AOC, update AOC as in change impact template, new VRA vendor release agreement, and a fee will be applicable for any administrative changes. Okay. In case of any designated change, again AOC, change impact template, new vendor release agreement, and fee. In case of annual attestation, it's just AOC, the ROC, and the new vendor release agreement. So these are the process or these are the documents which in vendors are supposed to share with the program manager in case of any changes to the secure SLC qualified listing. Now I'll request Mr. Nikhil to take it from here.
Thank you so much, Hari, for beautifully explained the entire PCI SLC services, okay, and how it exactly works. Okay, now before we quickly move on to the Q&A session, I would like to give you a little bit introduction or brief idea about the QRC. Okay, QRC started in the year 2016 as a consultancy firm, and in the very next year, we achieved our first credential and we became a PCI QSA company. Okay, by 2021, we achieved multiple credentials like we became a PCI QSA company for PCI DSS, PCI SSF, PCI 3DS. Along with that, we also achieved another credentials like ISO certification body for ISO 27001, which we called as ISMS. Along with that, ISO 27701, that is PIMS. With holding of this, we are also a Swift SSL body, and recently we have also achieved another credential, that is a certain empanel company. Now, our main services and product is a certification services. As I told you about the PCI certification and ISO certification body, along with that, being a certain empanel company, we are also capable to deliver compliance services, the guidelines which is given by the regulatory bodies such as RBI, NABARD, IRDA, and SEBI as well. Now, along with that, we do audit services and security services like VAPT. Our product such as RSMAS and CPMS. These are the recently we have launched RSMS is nothing but a remote system monitoring and audit system. CPMS is nothing but a compliance and project management system. These are the main services in the certification line which we are delivering by now. We are a PCI DSS certification body, PCI SLC, which currently we are working on it. PCI secure software certification, that is a PCI SSS and PCI 3DS as well. Along with that, you can see we are a certification body for ISO 27001, 27701, Swift CF assessment. Okay, with that, we also deliver assessment for SOC 1, SOC 2, SOC 3, HIPAA compliance assessment, and GDPR. On the very next slide, you can also see the compliance services, the guidelines which is given by regulatory body of India. Next. Our main services is, of course, the auditing services. We do the assessment and audit for IT audits, third party audit, secra audit, CCA audit for controller of certifying authorities, and CEA audit for cybersecurity in power sector. Security services like vulnerability assessment and penetration testing. There is a VAPT, web application testing, mobile application testing for both Android and iOS, API security testing, thick client application security, and so on. These are our credentials what currently QRC is holding since 2017, starting from the PCI DSS, continuing with the 3DS, SLC, software, SSF, there is a secure software SSL. Okay, we are a certification body for ISO as well as the certain empaneled company as well. These are our qualification and recognition. If you go to the council website or any of the authority website, you will find QRC details very clearly over there for the verification purpose. These are our few of our client list currently to whom we have done the assessment across the globe. You can see India, Europe, Middle East, America, APAC, and Africa region. Okay, QRC is a certification body for ISO for entire globe. Okay, along with that, we also do the certification for PCI DSS and other payment card industry services. This is our presence. Our head office is in India, Mumbai. Okay. Along with that, we have our footprints in US, Philippines, Bangladesh, East Africa, Indonesia, Thailand, Sweden, Turkey, Vietnam, Russia, and Uganda as well. Thank you. So I would request Mr. Hare to start the Q&A session. If anyone has any doubts or queries related to today's subject, we can start the session now.
Yes, you can paste your queries over the Q&A. We'll try to answer it. One query was there by Mr. Venkatesh that as for PCI requirement, how many times we should do the penetration testing? So it's annually, or in case of any changes or any modifications in the application, again the application testing should be done. When it comes to SLC, in case of SLC, what standard says that the testing should be done throughout the entire phases of development. It should not be like at the time of release only. Okay. So this is the requirement of application testing. Any other query, team? In the view of RBI's mandate, is that no merchant can store a customer's card. What is the significance on the DSA standard? So RBI is only mandating about the India region. Again, significance on the PCI DSS. It's PCI DSS. It's basically a global standard. It's nowhere restricting its merchants or the customers or the service providers to stop storing cardholder data. Again, now RBI is mandating these controls to not store cardholder data is for the service providers and the merchants, not for the banks. So again, the significance of the PCI DSS will not change. So there will not be any much changes with respect to PCI standard. It's just service providers and the merchants. They can max to max store token number. That's it. Encrypted card number or clear text or truncated card number, they are not allowed to store. So I don't think so there will be much significance on the DSS standard because RBI is regulating specific to the India region.